Awesome. Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Comms V Next. Thanks for heading over from the keynote. My name is Joy Apple. I actually have an official intro slide here. Well, okay, first though, we're going to talk about the sponsors. So I have to say, I'm going to brag, and I probably will end up doing this in all of my sessions this week. I've been coming and speaking here for, I think, 5 years now. My whole company, well, not my whole company, but my company, Orchestry, is here. So I'm super excited to see my company be one of the sponsors and show up and help support this event. It's probably one of my absolute favorite events of all the conferences that I go to in a year. So thank you for being here and supporting this. All right, but I am Joy Apple. I'm the Director of Success at Orchestry. We are a governance automation platform. So not only have I been talking about governance for going on 20 years now in the Microsoft space, I now work at a company where literally that's what we do, which is pretty cool. This fall, that 19 will tick up to 20, and it's hard to believe. I started out as a SharePoint farm admin. Actually, technically, I started out on the help desk. And then that's where you learn how everything works and who doesn't work. And then during that process, I transferred over to being the SharePoint farm admin. But yeah, when I'm not talking about this or I'm not doing my 9 to 5, I co-host Guardians of M365 Governance with Christian Buckley and Ragnar Heil. So we have a good time. All things governance there. It might be Copilot Studio, it might be device management, it might be intranets. Just you never know what the next topic's going to be. I have an official agenda slide, sorta. We're going to talk about information architecture. It's actually one of my absolute favorite things to talk about. Because back in the olden days when dinosaurs roamed the planet and every SharePoint installation was running on our servers in our own server rooms, I went through massive projects of re-architecting a Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007 farm. Anyone here from the Moss days? Woohoo! Re-architecting that had been built according to the org chart. And we worked in a government adjacent facility, and that org chart changed every 6 weeks whether it needed to or not. It was so fun. So that and watching people get zero information on how SharePoint works. They got an email that said, here's your SharePoint site, right? That was the rollout plan. So those sites either gathered cobwebs for a couple of years before I got in there and was very bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and let's do SharePoint, or they turned them into the SharePoint version of a file share. Y'all know how that works. It doesn't. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how Teams fits into the intranet because in my opinion, it's all part of the intranet. If that's where our employees are going and working, getting in information, it's part of the intranet. We're going to talk a little bit about channels, content, and everybody's favorite word these days, right? First session out of the gate. I'm going to say it, Copilot. Governance, future-proofing. A lot of people work right there. And I'm hoping some practical takeaways. Quick reality check. Where are we in the room? Is anyone moving from on-prem or maybe even an old version of SharePoint online that's just not worked well, doing any kind of migration exercises? Okay, awesome. Do you have more teams than you can count? No, not yet. Not yet. But you're going to roll out with governance, so that's not going to be a really big issue. I like it. You have private channels that nobody really remembers creating. We're not really sure how they got there. And oh my gosh, there's so much stuff, nobody can find it. Anybody living in that reality? Do you have Copilot yet? Okay. Are we about to deploy it? Anybody on the brink? Yeah. Okay. Are you worried about those more than teams than we can count? In Copilot and private channels and all that stuff? It's a big conversation. Anybody, and it's my marketing team, and nobody from marketing is in the room right now. I'm going to pick on my marketing team because marketing teams create the most content typically in an organization, right? Or at least a lot, and it's really big, and they've got a lot of different topics they cover. And their team's file tab does look like a personal junk drawer. But they know how to find it. I don't. So I have to go harass them all the time going, hey, can you send me this? Hey, can you send me this? I can't find that thing, right? So we're going to talk about all that fun stuff. But first, let's talk about the reality of modern architecture because it is very, very different than how we used to do it back in the olden days. which might even be how we're doing it now because that's the way we've always done it. And user behavior, I think, is the hardest part of any kind of IT project because we love our habits. And I'm going to say our habits because we all have the bad habits. Just depends on what scale is it that's impacting people. So things we know, things we have to accept. Yes, we probably are always going to have or be approaching more teams than we can count. Question about this though, is sprawl a bad thing? Seeing some yeses, I'm seeing some, I don't know. I used to be a consultant, so I'm going to give you my consultant answer for this one. I think it depends. Is it useful content? Is it being used? Is it active? Is it living? Is it breathing? Yes. You have a retention policy. Oh, he's already skipped ahead. He's already skipped ahead, right? Are we prepared to manage that content? That's how we keep the sprawl from being the bloat, the rot, the redundant, the outdated, the trivial. Now, if nobody's touched it, but we have to keep it because I might need it maybe one day in 30 years when it's completely obsolete, I'm going to want to go back and have fond memories of creating this policy. No, get it out of here. Teams is going to create content constantly. And maybe not necessarily Teams the product, but Teams the people in Teams, in their team in Teams, for the team, content constantly. All of that goes to SharePoint, right? Every bit of it. If it gets uploaded into a channel in Teams, going to SharePoint. If it gets uploaded, if it's a file uploaded in a one-on-one chat, where's it going? OneDrive. And OneDrive is SharePoint. That's right, that's right. So SharePoint owns it all, whether we want it to or not. Copilot sees it all, sorta, kinda, mostly. It depends. It depends on who has the permission to it. And it also depends on the architecture. It's getting a little bit better, but still I run tests from time to time to try to find stuff that's buried 10 folders deep. Search definitely is not finding that stuff that's 10 folders deep, right? Because that old, outdated version of information architecture is really not how the modern platform is designed to work. The graph is not going to go dig down 5, 8, 12 layers deep and surface that content. All right, so quick recap, especially if maybe we have someone new in the room for Teams. What's in that team? Channels, right? Channels in my mind, they really are the information architecture of the team, speaking broadly, right? That's where we interact with chat, posts, channels, tabs, all that good stuff. You absolutely have integration points within the confines of those channels, right? Where we can do some really wild and wonderful things. If we're thinking about web pages and we can link to content there, inside of our channels, you can have tabs to take you to that content. Storage, files tab. Right? That's our storage pointing back to SharePoint. The supporting cast, of course, is the M365 group. That's that security layer. You might have Planner. You could argue that that should maybe be up on the integration thing, all loop lists, whatever. We've got it all. We've got it all. Every team I create creates a SharePoint site collection. You could just say SharePoint site these days. I feel either could be accepted as true, right? But a top level SharePoint site. Modern architecture in M365 is we hub, we don't sub. So we use hub sites to join things together that are related. We don't build sub-sites in that information architecture. And you can't connect a team to a sub-site, right? So if that's really going to be an active collaboration point, it makes sense that it is that top level site. We've got a team, we've got our channels, a place where I can organize my content and my communications according to the way we work. Bless you. Private and shared channels. Who's using shared channels? Yes. Are you doing the B2B, direct connect? That way, awesome. You are in a very advanced minority in the users of Teams. We find so many people are very uncomfortable having that trust between tenants. We'll say at Orchestrate, we use crap out of shared channels internally. So we're not creating a lot of teams for things. We use them a lot, but we're not doing that B2B correct. Yes. We don't really have guest access in our environment. So for a shared channel, you can't technically have a guest. You could have those external users. You can't add a guest. You can't bring in like an external guest account. They're a little different. It's quite a thing, isn't it? Yeah. One thing to note for those private and shared channels, they do spin up separate SharePoint sites, not those old traditional site collections, it's a real, I'm going to say air quotes, it's not a real site, yes, in the front. Right. Right. They do want folders. How many folders is too many? Does anybody have an opinion? She's like, I got customers, they want their folders. And Teams isn't anti-folder by any means because every channel is a folder. Okay. This view, no more than 3 deep. I like that answer. A lot of that's going to depend on the culture of the organization, right? How they think about their data. The no more than 3 deep is my favorite answer because that's about the point where the graph goes, nope, I'm really not sure what's going on down here. And that's not a number of folders issue with the graph. That is a URL length character issue because it also kind of depends on how long the names of those things are of when you hit that cutoff. It is different now, but what is the new one? Anybody? We will get back to you on that because I'm blanking on it. But yes, there has been an increase there. Yeah, the flatter, the better. Views are still a thing in SharePoint. And you can use them in that Files tab in Teams. It's just different. So I don't think they've ever been adopted as well as they could be. And then hub sites. Let hub sites do that logical grouping where those things that share resources, share people, share scope within your SharePoint sites are related. Hub them together so those shared resources could live in one centrally thing. Fun fact, I think I have this on a different slide, but I want to say it now because I'm irritated about it. Those sites connected to private and shared channels, you can't join those to a hub. Curses. Are there workarounds? Sure, you could link to them, but just know that going in. All right, this is unreadable, so I'm going to zoom in. But this is actually based off an information architecture diagram I did for a customer. This is a very simplified version of that. Because when I zoom in here, that's a little bit more better. Corporate, home, communication site. I don't need a group for that, right? That's my main publishing site for the whole company. But then I've got human resources, and they have a communication site where anyone that's an employee can go get a benefits document, a guide, can find out who's in charge of whatever, is there bring your own device policy, all the good stuff. Then each functional area in HR gets their own team, cleverly color-coded purple, that has the associated team site, right? That's where they work. Why would they all get their own per functional business area team and team site? That one collective workspace is what we call it. Because probably people that work in short-term benefits don't need to see what the hiring right? There's people data there, there's PII, so we need that security boundary so they can work securely in their own areas. If they want a place for everybody to come together in HR and tell fun HR stories, whatever those may be, I don't know, right? They could have that too, right? They got options here. The beautiful thing about scaling out and building flat this way, keeping everything at the high level, set your permissions at that top level. By rejecting the urge to build down deep, you're getting rid of that broken layer of permissions every time you step down, right? Permissions stay much cleaner, and you have the advantage of collaboration at scale throughout the entire environment. That sounded very Microsofty, collaboration at scale. Right? That's what we're here for. So you start to build out, and the first time Microsoft recommended in about 20, no subsites. Everything's a top level site. I was like, holy moly, that's a lot of sites. That really bothered me from my on-prem mindset. Until you think about the way those subsites were built, we always had a lot of sites. They just went down deep. We didn't see them all. They felt almost hidden, like the iceberg that the Titanic hit. Right now, they're all out here, and we can see them. So it feels like there's more to manage. It's not that big a difference. Okay. So again, this is just a touch base here. On average, I'm curious to see in the room, like, how many SharePoint sites do you think you have in your environment? I'm guessing probably more than 10. Like a lot, unless we're brand new, might still be building those out. Do we have more than 1,000? More than 10,000? Hey, what you got? Best guess. Got you. Got you. You. It's a lot of management. Having that security level at the top is so much easier than them being buried underneath. Do you think you're still working with subsites in your environment? Probably some still out there. I think if we came from a legacy or an on-prem environment, most of us do still have some out there. Yes, sir. Some organizations absolutely will be. Some, they're still getting there. I have one of my largest customers that I work with. They've got a little over 100,000 SharePoint sites in their environment. They're not there yet with Purview. They're getting there. If you're allowed to have AI. Yeah, some of our more regulated folks are still trying there. Of course, you would think if you're that regulated, the first thing you would be that security piece. It's interesting how that can work in the environment. The things we're going to think about too, we're getting ready. Think about our information architecture. We're thinking about throughout the lens of AI and content readiness. Is like, what's in our file shares? Do we still have that on-prem storage that people are still actively needing, but they don't have the advantage of it being in Teams? They can actively collaborate that on together, have those conversations. And I'm curious, from our permission structures today, are we managing those team by team, site by site, folder by folder, item by item? You'll see a lot of a mixed bag around that. I would presume so. Has there been an appetite in your environment to break that down, simplify those permissions to go to that kind of perfect, set it at the top and be able to let the permissions flow down? Are we trying to do that internally? Do it. Yeah. Yes. Security by obscurity. Or you forget about it, and those links, those sharing links, sit out there forever, and you forget you have access to it until it informs a report. Yeah. And you didn't realize you had. And I'm seeing a lot of my customers today are approaching that through migration. They're migrating content from this folder to this site where all the permissions are correct there, whereas before it was scattered out throughout different folders or channels, all that good stuff. It's a big big undertaking for a lot of organizations. So next we're going to move on to like how we take that frame of thought and we think specifically about Teams and how that fits into the intranet. Now, if I say Teams is part of your intranet, how many of you are like, rock on, yes, Teams is part of the intranet? How many are like, nope, that's private? Cool, cool, cool. Let's talk about it. Let's get into it. There's a guy on Instagram. He's real Southern. I enjoy his stuff. He says, let's discuss. So let's discuss. All right. Communication sites, team sites. In my mind, there are two, it's like a coin. There are two sides to an intranet. There's the company public. If you're an employee, you can just get to it, you search, you find it. It's got all the goodies for everybody in the organization. And that's going to be over here on my communication site. One-to-many publishing, controlled authorship. People own the HR communication site. A small group of people own the IT communication site, right? That's where policies, procedures, all that good stuff goes. Then the flip side is the department private, or the project private, or the, what do we used to call it? I'll just go functional business area private, whatever you want to call that. That's where we lock it down according to who's on the team, who's in the team, who's doing this work, who should have access to it, who should be able to read, edit, collaborate, talk about in those small groups. And for me, that's where it's that team side tied to teams. So we got company public in our communication sites, no group, no team. Teams and team sites, groupified permissions, using that full suite of capabilities that we have as a group inside of that team to get that work done together. And a lot of times we're going to take the output from those teams and team sites and ship it over to a communication site somewhere where people have access to it, right? Publish it out. We used to do that, publishing back in the day. So if we start breaking down who owns what, right? Corporate comms or department leads are typically going to own those communication sites. Team sites with that teams layer are going to be managed by, maybe it's the managers of those departments. I think sometimes it makes more sense for the manager to be aware of what's going on, but not actually be managing the team side of things. They may have a lot of other balls they're juggling, right? But you have those active participants that are members of the projects, the groups, the team and teams, actually in there getting that work done. And I think Teams brings such a dynamic piece to that. Can you imagine? Like, we used to do this via, like, we had Skype for chat, but I don't remember really using Skype as much back in the day for that real-time collaboration we were working. I would ask a question, hope to get an answer. But now it's like I can't get away from it no matter where I go. This is where all my work happens, is through those chats and channels inside of Teams. Crazy busy. So if we break that down, we're like, okay, department private, project private, whatever that thing may be. What about those times when we have people that need to have access to files, but we don't really want them in Teams looking at the chat? Do you have any of those situations where you want to bring someone in from another department to see your output before it's published, but they don't need to be in the channel chatting, right? We still have the benefit of those good old-fashioned SharePoint groups sitting in SharePoint. We can absolutely do that. Add them as viewers in SharePoint. Doesn't mean they're coming in as collaborators inside of Teams, because we might be talking about them and they just don't need to know. They don't need to know. They can just look at the documents. So there's still a lot of ways you can slice and dice how you use Teams and SharePoint together to get that really rich, powerful document collab going on in the environment. So to the nitty-gritty then, we'll pivot and talk a little bit about channels, content, and Copilot. Before we do that, how many of you feel that your users get channels? They get them? How old is Teams now? 7 years old? 9? You know that GIF? That's the lady from the Titanic. She's like, it's been 84 years. I feel like her right now. What do you think's the disconnect for channels? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Change is hard, right? Especially when I think we as IT professionals, we can dig it. if it's our idea or if we're the one that gets to try it first and then we push it out to other people, I think we tend to be less change adverse than everyone else. I don't know. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm going to pitch a fit about it at first. And it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We see the advantage and we can get behind it. So I think to your point, change is definitely a hard thing. Like, oh, why is it got to be different? What are and this is like not in the deck. I'm just curious what we feel that disconnect is with helping them get the point. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I joke sometimes. Anyone here work for Microsoft directly? Like they need a thesaurus. Like maybe try another word. Yes. Yes. Lowercase t. So I was on a customer site in 2016, 17, something like that. And Teams had just launched. So we were trying to figure out how to talk about Teams and team sites in the same conversation. And this was maybe a couple of months old conversation. We were literally doing hand signals the whole time. It was crazy trying to have that, trying to make sure we were talking about the same thing. It really is interesting. And I think I've tried to break it down with some of my customers, especially when I was doing more training and adoption. And it was like, how do you think about, I should do have a slide for this later. It's like, how do you think about the way you work with your team and teams? Right? What do you do? Could you label that process? So take that label and name your channel that thing. Right? Project works easy. When I was running projects all the time, I'm going to do a migration. So I'm going to have a customer name for my team, and I'm going to have a migration channel. I'm going to have a IA channel. I'm going to have a custom web part channel, right? You could break that down. That gets really easy. But it's when people are doing people things that gets a lot harder. And I think if we finally, about this somewhere between 7 and 9 years later, finally find the right words, or we're able to sit down and have that conversation in a comfortable setting with our users, and just, I think we would see a better adoption instead of like, oh, we have to do this now. It's like, oh, this could be really useful. It's hard to get there. Okay, a white slide is coming up. So if you're sensitive to light, do this. There it is. Okay, 3 types of channels, very, very different stories. Standard channel. I have a story, but I can't tell it because it's still under NDA. Just wait. Just wait. All right. Where files live. So that standard channel, right? We create a team and we get the general channel, and there's, the shared tab. I don't like that. But all that good stuff is there, which then goes and creates a folder, the F word in SharePoint, into the shared document. Everyone can see the stuff, right? So those standard channels, we've got them. Everyone in the team and teams working with their team can see all the stuff. One size fits all for the permissions per team, per group, right? That can be not good enough for a lot of us for the way we work. That one size fits all isn't always practical. So then we start to branch out. We have our private channels. I absolutely have a love-hate relationship with these things. Mostly hate. But because I feel like it duplicates that old things like, well, we'll just create a folder here and we'll take the world's most important spreadsheet, keep it on the site where the whole company has permissions, but we'll put it in this folder with different permissions. I hate it so much. So we tend to see that kind of tendency to go in and create those silos, not because there's a security need, but because there's a business want. I just don't want them to see it. And I came from the government side of the world, and I've kind of gotten away from this in recent years. But I used to say all the time when someone would say, well, we'll just put a folder. It's like, is it a breach of security? Powerful words. Is it a breach of security? Everyone in this library sees this content. Well, no, but not everyone, really cares. That's not your job to worry about it. Let it go. They don't care. Guess what they're going to do? Scroll, right? If they're like, oh, yes, then why are you putting it here with everything else? It needs to go somewhere set apart, right? Another gotcha here. We talk about AI. When we talk about security, I feel like we talk about oversharing a whole lot. And I think that fear of oversharing causes us to create those security silos. What about the undersharing side of it? What if I should be able to see that stuff because it's absolutely part of my work stream? But when I go do a prompt to find out, can you catch me up on the last 30 days of all the conversations about this? I need to prepare for a presentation on it. I don't have access to that brand new private channel. I am now working with only part of the picture. I don't have access to all that content. My content may be wrong now because I wasn't part of that and I should have been. And I think we get into that same situation with our one-on-one chats too. How often I'm in a, Ruth and I, with this whole front row, we're in a project together, right? We're doing something in Teams. I have this one weird question. So I go talk to Ruth about it because I'm comfortable going to Ruth about it. I'm not going to feel stupid. I'm not going to feel like I should know. I'm like, hey, could you sanity check me on this? Now we're having business conversations and maybe making decisions. The rest of the front row doesn't know anything about it, right? There's a lot of gotchas inside of creating these silos. Private channels are absolutely big picture of that. And it's something to think about, and it's something to talk about with our users. Shared channels. Shared and private, right? They're both creating separate sites. I have a typo, not a site collection, separate sites. There is amazing cross-tenant functionality there, absolutely. Nice thing about it, so my private channel, I can only add people who are already here. But I need a cubby hole for something that's sensitive. Not everybody here should see it, maybe just me and a manager or something. Cool. There, if I go to the shared channel, now I can bring in whoever I need to populate it without creating a whole separate team and increasing my Teams IA. I'm still increasing my SharePoint IA a little bit. But if it's a business need, valid, it's active, living, breathing content, it's useful, cool. That's what it's here for. Copilot enters the conversation, or whichever AI of choice, right? Copilot will always respect the permissions that are in place, regardless if they're right or wrong, right? It can't know if Joy was supposed to be part of this conversation. It only knows what the IA says. IA for our AI. That's a whole other session. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They're saying I'm going to repeat too. So you get a new person, and oops, we forgot to add the new person to all these private channels. A year later. I didn't know that even existed. Right. Orchestra Booth 7 can help with things like that. Honestly, when it comes to that kind of stuff, my brain is going to PowerShell and some kind of a fancy workflow. Could absolutely do that. Ooh. Yeah. Groups are always better than individuals. Is it always the same membership that should be there, or do they choose to pick and choose? And that would work. Yeah. 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 That's the elegant solution, if it supports that whole cloth, absolutely. Joy was totally going to overcomplicate that. Mhm. Right. So you can kill the group without without the security breach. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, the owner of that team would go, "Oh, we got a new guy." So in a perfect world, we would have governance in place that says you can have no less than 3 owners of every group, and if one goes away, there's a policy that comes up and goes, "Excuse me, you only have 2, you need to add somebody else." Work history. But, I mean, there are ways you can do that, but it's tricky. The group solution, okay, you're gonna have a private channel, this group is gonna be present. You got somebody that's in there, they're just automatically there. That would work, unless they go crazy pants. Oh, only 2 people in this one, 3 in that one. Ultimate power. And then you get it. So a process and a form. Just a visual, real quick, just in case, level setting again, a reminder. As again, in a perfect world, our owners of Project Excelsior know what they've got going on. But I think honestly, in the real world, we know this is here. We know we've got those folders over here. So this is actually an old screenshot. It doesn't show the team icon and give you the link to the other sites that are out there. You need to update that. But I think some of our owners are so overwhelmed by the sheer number of teams they actually do own that it is almost a hot potato when it's time to do that day to day, maybe month to month management of their teams. It just becomes a lot. But I do think too, sometimes we're so busy in teams. We were joking at setting up the booth this morning. That don't you love it when you're in the next room and Teams starts ringing, so you like dash through the house to get to it? It's like my short burst of cardio first thing in the morning. You don't know what you're going to miss. We tend to forget that there's a lot of power behind the scenes in that SharePoint group. A lot of really good old school document collaboration. Who remembers ECM, Enterprise Content Management, can still happen behind that team. It doesn't have to be that flat, dare I say, almost kind of oversimplified interface that we can have inside of Teams. Okay. I think this confuses people too. Some of the changes in the UI that the private channels don't show up as folders inside of SharePoint, the way they've made those UI changes to allow them to get to those things helps. Reminding them, is in our organizations invested in having training for our users when it comes to their teams and their channels? Are we seeing that across the board? Okay, a lot of yeses and a lot of nos. Okay, fair, it's fair. So asking questions, do users have to come to you every time they need something new? Yes. Okay, see a lot of yeses. Questions. How many of us ask why and how before we give them their solution? Awesome. I'm seeing like, nope. You have a question, you get this. Actually, I think it's tomorrow. I'm doing a session on how to win friends in the business and solve problems. Part of that is asking the question. I used to have people come to me all the time and say, I need a folder. They really needed a site, but they knew the word folder because we'd just come off the file share, right? So it was like, okay, what needs to go into that folder? Who needs to have access? What are you going to do with this, right? So if they need something new, it could be, hey, I need a place to put stuff. What kind of stuff? Do you already have a team where the people that need access to it get right asking them these questions? So do you already have a team? Yeah, right? Is it a breach of security if everybody in the team sees this new stuff? No, standard channel. Is everybody that needs access already in the team where you're working? No. Oh, we've complicated it. Okay. Is it different people, different audience? It could be a new team. It could be a shared channel. If they're not in the team, it can't be a private channel, right? You've got to be a member of that group to go into the private channel. So we start asking those questions. Is everybody in there already in the team? Yes. Cool. Is it a breach of security if everybody in the team says it? Yes. Private channel, cubby hole, right? If we can kind of walk them down this process, there would be fewer instances of those siloed channels just sitting out there, right? But man, the reality of the private channels, they absolutely hide a lot of sprawl that a lot of people can't ever see is there. Yes, sir. Are they going to just be viewing those files before like an official publishing action happens? They use them as part of their work, but they should just see them collaboratively. Yep. Yep. Right. My preference, okay, so we've got folders and subfolders, and we've got people that just need access to subfolders. They shouldn't see everything that's in the folder, much less the whole library that those folders are in. My preference, I'm old. I like to secure the largest object possible. And I'm sure they probably like that subfolder thing because they're in Teams and it's super fast and easy just to open and do that. I would prefer to have that as a separate library. We want to keep them within that same site so the finance people aren't having to go around the world and back again. I would make it a separate library. So at least you're not fighting through site, folder, subfolder permissions, right? You have a library, you know everything in that library is appropriate for that audience. Put a tab to it in the finance team for them and call it what it is, shared with whatever, right? Sometimes we think our names of things has to be so very perfect, but as long as it's very clear of what it is, that could go a long way. That would be how I would handle it. Yeah. If you can bump that permission level up as much as possible, less management on the back end and less hidey holes. We released shared link reporting in our product end of last year. And when I sit down with a customer and they see all the areas of granular permissions, it's just like, oh my gosh. It's a lot. And it can't, unwieldy is the perfect word. There's definitely a lot to it. Yeah, definitely. So I made up a statistic that put on the slide, and I think I can get away with it because I'm admitting it. I totally made it up. But speaking of, that was actually perfect. Thank you for the segue. Adding to that library across the top, right? Tabs reduces the context switching for our people. All those places that they have to go to. It could be a website somewhere else if they work with a regulatory website somewhere. Put a tab to tell them, did you know you could do this? Tab to those things they use all the time. So I made it up. Tabs reduce the #1 cause of dumping. Context switching. It is for me because I have the attention span of a goldfish. You're going to get maybe 90 solid seconds of me trying to figure out where this is going to go until I'm like, good enough. Search will find it for me later. The worst. I'm actually, yeah, we can go there. I'm actually a recovering desktop dumper. I was cleaning out I governance my house over the holidays. way. Like at least a dozen bags went to Goodwill. My husband is a collector. He's losing his mind. I didn't touch his stuff. You might need it. Don't care. So I was going through my office closet and I found I was so fancy back in the day, my 1 terabyte external hard drive. I haven't seen that since I moved 5 years ago. It's like, oh, what's in this? 3 folders called desktop. Never needed those again, but I might. So I put right. But if I had had a very easy, clear, logical, secured place, I don't have to go hunt it. I just know to put it there. That's why hub sites are so amazing. Even I know we're talking about teams in the architecture, but if I'm on a project for a customer, maybe we have 3 different teams and teams for our team working on this project. Hub them. All those shared resources like the statement of work and the contact list for points of contact, all that stuff can be in one central place. And give me a tab to it in Teams. Don't let me go look for it. Because I'm going to look for it, I'm going to duplicate it. So if I duplicate it, when it's time to update the thing, which one's going to get updated? The one I find, right? Yeah. Tab, 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 tab. How many tabs is too many? Depends on how wide your monitor is. Just go nuts, they'll figure it out, right? Theirs anyway. Teach them, enable them. Then we turn our attention to the governance that will actually work. We hope, right? And it's really interesting. I will say this for AI, as much as I make jokes about it. When the second Beetlejuice movie came out, I made a Copilot meme with the Copilot logo over Beetlejuice's face. It's popping up, so I say it 3 times and it will appear. Copilot. And it's here. But it got the governance conversation going. I used to go into a customer site and say, okay, we're going to talk about something. I'm going to say the G word, and I'm so sorry. And they would roll their eyes and say, nobody has time for governance. You know why? Because we used to write 100-page governance manuals. Who ever read it? Who ever read the 100-page governance manual? Maybe the person that wrote it. That's it, right? So now we can talk about governance that actually works. We hope. It takes time, right? If site provisioning is unchecked, and I actually have dual opinions on this, right? The main thing for me, I don't care so much that there's an approval process for Brenda and accounting getting a team. I really don't. I don't care. That's accounting's business, what they do. I manage the back end of the architecture. But if there's no verification process, if there's no check to make sure Brenda, true story, working with a customer a few years ago, we ran a report out of Orchestra to see how many teams were named HR. 11. Right? So we want to help Brenda not create the 12th one. She just didn't know the other 11 were out there, right? So verification processes can help that. It doesn't have to be a human being reading like the form that gets submitted, right? There are ways to do that, but some kind of a process, I think, absolutely helps with that. Inconsistent metadata. Now, I'm an old school SharePoint girl. I never metadata I didn't like. Right? But that metadata, making sure that the metadata is right, builds trust because it makes the search better. Copilot actually does way better with metadata than it used to, right? So it can reason over things. So if we have inconsistent metadata and folder deep structures, this I got folder heavy on the slide. I think I'm going to change it. Folder deep, because it's that depth that really has the negative impact, right? Then our users don't trust what search is bringing back to them. And I think we've kind of gotten to a point, if we've rolled out AI tools without doing the governance, we're not really trusting what AI is bringing to us too, right? And that's a problem. And how many times have we heard in our IT career, SharePoint search sucks? You know why it sucks? You never throw anything away. It's finding all the stuff, right? So unchecked site provisioning can absolutely be an issue. I don't really care. Again, I want to have a retention policy on the back end, making sure if you don't use it, it gets cleaned up. 100% absolutely, storage is not. Making sure that we trust what we're getting back because we have metadata, flat architecture. Permission inheritance issues have hurt us so badly in so many different ways. Um, but breaking down, if you go and you see the worst of it, those tangled up knots of broken permissions, it's usually the deeper the nested structure is usually the worse the permissions management is there. That's where we start to see again a lot of duplication and sprawl. Duplication leads to the lack of trust because I don't know which one of these is right. One of them was updated last week. One of them was updated 2 weeks ago. Maybe one's 5 years old, but that's the one everybody keeps emailing around, right? It's a problem. And then that behavioral architecture. That's going to be like where I go in, I say, well, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this is right. I didn't know these 3 private channels existed. So I'm just going to do my job the best that I can, hoping I've got the right data. Right? We see it over and over and over again. This is where the chaos really starts to come into the tenant. I think most of us probably live this every day. All right, next slide. Thinking about those issues, those problems, the 4 main areas of where we can start to address it, right? Most of these problems that we do see, though, is ties back to the permission issues. I mean, this could be a little bit of a story time. I feel like we've done some good sharing already around the stories of what we're seeing in channels, where we had these challenges, like even though they were there. He's been here a year. We forgot to add him to it, right? Probably going to be my favorite one for my next IA story. But what kind of a policy or decision tree could prevent something like that from happening? I love the group solution. You know, if it doesn't have to be custom for every other of those private channels, having that group that's there as part of their onboarding process could absolutely fix that. What are some other things that could keep that private channel sprawl from biting us in the rear a year down the road? Pardon? Just go back to pen and paper? Could work. I'll put it in my drawer and lock it. No one will ever get to it again. Or maybe having policies around the creation of those private channels. Should they all be private channels, right? Those kind of conversations could help. They might. It might be they have to. What would help you fix it now if you could? Do you think a group solution would be the way to do that? Sponsorship, maybe having a closer relationship between IT and the business for some of these processes? Think so? Okay. More control? Okay. Who to reach out to, processes, guardrails. What happens if that becomes a bottleneck for the user? Do we care? I said an honest question. Sometimes maybe. Yes. That's true. Fair. That's a very precise number. So many years ago, I had a customer. I'd done the Teams training with them. They'd set up their teams. IT, of course, was dog fooding. I think sometimes, though, we're the worst people to dog food, right? But they were dog fooding. So they created a team for the IT department. And I got an email from my point of contact there. He's like, I don't know if you have availability today, but whatever we did, Teams is not working. Nothing is working right. This is broken. If you could help us, that would be great. Like, of course. These are the people that make the fryers for Chick-fil-A. So I was absolutely on high availability for them. Because if you would go on site, sometimes it was Chick-fil-A French fry day. It's a good day. All right. So hop on a Teams call with them. And what had happened was they set up their department team and Teams for the team. And then every area of the department, they made a private channel, but then they couldn't use the planner. Now we can't see the files, but now this doesn't work. I can't mention it didn't work because they had ripped apart the security structure that allows Teams to work, right? So again, it's just having those conversations. Sometimes I think we feel like broken records, but it's having those conversations over and over and over again, reinforcing, reminding, refreshing, and all that good stuff. So we take those 4 areas of the content and the sprawl, and we think about from a governance perspective how we take that and those pillars of governance. These are all areas of governance that Copilot will lean on, and search, and the graph, and us as human beings. If the structure is well organized, predictable hierarchies, we're going to have less sprawl, cleaner permissions and whatever. We're going to talk permissions in the next one, right? Less sprawl, better answers. Also more efficient answers. Is anybody on pay-as-you-go with AI in their environment? It terrifies me. For some, I think it makes sense. But the better your structure, the more efficient that AI tool is going to be in getting your answer. It's going to be a cheaper cost on the back end for those pay-as-you-go models. So a lot of things to think about there, right? Permissions are the AI boundary. So if it's overly exposed, but it was 10 folders, I don't know, 10 folders, it might pick it up. It depends on how it's named, right? Nobody remembered it was there, so it felt secure. Kind of a false flag, right? AI very well may find that, bring it back. Copilot can absolutely look through that metadata. So when we upload a file, are we associating metadata with it, right? Sometimes the metadata, the name itself is good. For the graph, the title and the description are going to be 2 of the heaviest weighted columns that search is looking at. So making sure there's good information there makes that not just more searchable, but more findable, more relevant in those results, right? If we don't give context to AI, it has to infer that. It's inferring that based on all the other random signals it's picking up from us throughout the day, right? So that could be kind of iffy. Okay, so breaking it down, defining the content types. Right? What is it? What are the columns that should always be associated with like types of data, even in Teams? Right? You can still have a rich column-rich experience inside of Teams. I wouldn't require every column because that's just going to annoy people, right? But you can still have it there, have some default values. Automate wherever you can. Governance isn't automated. It's probably not actually anything. Right? We love the idea of naming conventions. Those really only work when it's automated, right? Because we're busy. I'm going to do it right the first day, probably not the 5th. Right? Automate wherever possible. Map your site columns, index those, right? So the search is going to be better. Use the site columns too as much as possible as opposed to making new ones. That will go a long way for search and relevancy. And then that last one is enable, right? If I have all this stuff set up here, then Copilot's going to do a lot better job of knowing which is the latest policy that's owned by legal or finance, or the latest budget that was uploaded into the very special folder, wherever that may live, right? So we're helping it help us. Now, this is work. This is a lot of work. Setting it up is easy. Asking the business, what do you call the things you work on? What column should always be associated with it every time it's uploaded, right? Should you have a status? I wouldn't do version, but I mean, some prefer to have that in a standalone column, right? It does take work, but the payoff starts to become just absolutely magical. I'm going to jump through this one in the interest of time. So I have a 30-second governance checklist, things that you could take away to think about implementing. I'm going to say soon because, again, this is work. If we can move those sub-sites into top-level sites, use hubs as appropriate. Metadata over folders will always win. Efficiency, search, Copilot, all the good stuff. permissions at the this is site level. I won't absolutely die on that hill, but it's much better if it can. Highest, largest object possible will always win. Always, always win from manageability, findability. You can do some policies. My thing is beeping at me around this, but try to always have at least 2. My favorite number is 3 owners in every group, every SharePoint site, so we minimize those orphaned ownerless workspaces. Life cycle. Gentleman back here mentioned this like 2 slides in, making sure that we've got policies, retention policies, SharePoint advanced management, things in place to help clean up our content and reduce the duplication, tabs, links, make it easy. And then I'm going to put this last one up. I'm going to fast forward. Ask. If you guys want these slides later, I'm happy to share them out. I think they're going to be collecting them. Ask the questions. Ask the questions. You'll get really good information, and the result on the back end will just be so much better long term. And then very last slide. I'm going to fast forward through this one too. Things you could take immediate action on. Now, actually implementing these will not be immediate action. Things you could absolutely take away and start doing. And we're talking a lot about SharePoint in a Teams conversation, but that's where all the content lives. Auditing, running the reports, using your admin center, and just going through, taking a look, exporting it, uploading it to your company-approved AI tool. Assessment. Good stuff you can absolutely do. All right. I am going to fast forward. I think I have a thank you slide. So thank you for coming. Apologies, we went a couple of minutes over. I appreciate the feedback, the input, the opinions, your war stories. Hope to see you around the rest of the conference. I've got a couple of sessions tomorrow, and my colleagues are at group 7. So go say hi to Orchestra. Thank you, thank you, thank you.